I've been watching a lot of $500 gaming PC build guides lately, and every time I sit down to watch one, I'm interested to see how people choose to spend that budget. Today I want to show you a build that I put together in this budget range that outclasses anything that I've seen so far. What I want to focus on is how you can maximize a $500 budget utilizing the used market. You likely won't be able to copy this build one for one, as I've picked up some really good deals, but this is more to serve as an example of how with a little bit of patience, work, and deal hunting, you can extract a ton of value out of this budget. To find parts for this build, I mostly looked for deals on Facebook Marketplace and local classified sites. I did also buy a couple of new things because that was where the best value was. This included places like AliExpress and sales on Amazon. To find good deals, I recommend that you consistently check these sources a few times a day. Generally, really good deals are going to get picked up pretty quick, so checking often throughout the day will increase your chances of being the first person to some of these deals. Don't get too discouraged if you miss something. There's always going to be more that come by. For finding deals on new components, I like to check the Build a PC Sales subreddit. If you have any other suggestions for places that you've had good luck using, let me know in the comments. I'm always down to check out new sources for finding parts. So what parts did I decide to go with for this build? Starting off with the motherboard, not that you can't find good prices on other motherboard platforms, but I still seem to have the best luck picking up AM4 motherboards at really good prices. I was able to pick up this ASRock B450M Steel Legend for $50. This was picked up on my local used market. I will mention that I see Amazon refurbs go for about the same price, maybe about $10 more pretty often. While the B450 boards only support PCIe Gen 3, this shouldn't make much of a difference for gaming, especially if you're picking up a GPU that utilizes a full 16 PCIe lanes. If you do see a B550 motherboard for a similar price, this will give you access to PCIe Gen 4 for faster SSDs with also a very slight uplift in GPU performance. One of the things that's so good about the AM4 platform is the number of CPUs that you have access to, including the X3D chips. These have extra cache that dramatically increase gaming performance to the point where they're comparable to newer CPU generations. For this build, I picked up a Ryzen 5 5700 X3D from AliExpress for $143 after tax. Honestly, I was a bit hesitant to purchase it from AliExpress because I was a little bit skeptical that I'd actually get what I ordered, but after seeing many other people order off this site, I decided to test my own luck. The CPU came a day early, and it fills just as fast as my 5800 X3D without a side-by-side comparison. Depending on your needs, something like a Ryzen 5 5600 or 5700X might be good choices if you'd like to allocate a bit more of the budget towards other parts. Another thing to keep an eye out for, I have noticed that there's been a lot of tech YouTubers that have had discount codes for AliExpress, so things like spend $100, get $20 off. So it's probably worth it to keep an eye out for those. I think when I bought this, I did use a Toasty Bros coupon code. I'm not sure if that's still valid or not. I would just suggest checking around to see if there's anything current with that, especially currently when I'm releasing this. It is close to Black Friday, so I would expect there to be some similar sales, similar discounts, hopefully. It's pretty common for CPUs from AliExpress to not come with a CPU cooler. So for cooling this CPU, I picked up a Master Cooler Hyper 212 Spectrum V3. Browsing the Build a PC Sales subreddit, I found a link to this cooler on Amazon for only $10. I also saw this same cooler during Amazon Prime days on sale for about $12. So both of these prices are cheaper than I can usually find any used tower coolers on the used market. So I picked up a few of these for future builds and then also one to use for this build. This will work pretty well for a 5700 X3D. For the RAM, I was able to find a 2x8GB kit of G-Skills Ripjaws 5 that was clocked at 3600 MHz CL16. This was listed for $25 on Facebook Marketplace. I offered the seller $20 and they agreed, and I was able to pick it up that day. I have had pretty good luck picking up 16GB kits that are clocked at 3200 MHz for about $20 on the used market pretty often. But if that's something that you're not finding locally, then you can also find similar rated kits on Amazon for about $30. For the SSD that I'll be using in this build, I really lucked out. I found a 1TB T-Force G50 Gen 4 SSD for only $30 on my local news classified site. I arranged to meet with the seller And when I got to their house that night, I knocked on the door and there's no answer. I waited for about 15 minutes and then I looked at the listing again and it was actually marked as sold. I texted the seller and they never answered me. So I figured that maybe somebody offered them more for this SSD or somebody had gotten to it before me. I was a little annoyed, but it wasn't too out of my way, so I brushed it off. Surprisingly, the next day, the seller actually reached out to me and apologized. They said they thought someone would be there to give me the SSD, and they asked if I still wanted it. I let them know that I did, and that I could swing by that day. When I got there, they said I could just have the SSD for free. I tried to offer them like $20 or something like that, but they insisted that they weren't going to use it, and they said I could just have it. So I got a free new in-box 1TB SSD somehow. I guess this goes to show that you never know what you'll come across purchasing parts on the used market. If I was going to replicate this build again, this is probably one of the areas that I would change up also. You can commonly find 500GB SSDs on Amazon for around $30, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, depending on the type of SSD that you're purchasing, but also if there's any sales going on. So right now, would be a good time to pick up like a $30 500GB NVMe SSD, just because it's close to Black Friday. For the power supply, I picked up this Rosewell 650 watt gold rated unit in a combo deal for $20. If I'm being honest, this is probably one of the weaker points in the build. The wattage is a bit low for what I'd typically recommend for the tier of graphics card that I'll be using. Another downside is that it comes with ketchup and mustard cables that we love to hate on. And another thing I didn't realize when I picked up the PSU is that this is actually a low rated unit on the infamous GPU tier list. In testing the PC the last few days, I'm not really concerned about this. It seems to work fine. I think that I would probably be pretty comfortable using this, and this technically is still a budget build, but this might be another area that if you were trying to replicate this build, that you could allocate a bit more money to improve. As for the case, I guess after looking at some more build guides for $500 builds, the idea of improving the aesthetics got to me, and I decided to pick up this case, which is a Corsair 4000X, that included 3 ARGB fans. Originally I was going to pick it up for $40, but when I got there, the top mesh was missing, so they gave it to me for $30. Moving on to the GPU, I was actually able to pick up one of the best deals that I've come across. I got this MSI Ventus 3 RTX 3080 Ti for just $200. The person I bought it from was upgrading to an AMD, I think it was a 7900 XT. If you want to know more about the specifics of this, or a deep dive on the graphics card, I did make a separate video on that, so feel free to check that out. If I'm being honest, I got pretty lucky picking this graphics card up at this price. So this is one of the components that will be pretty difficult to replicate. But I am pretty confident that with some patience and also some deal hunting, you can still pick up some pretty good value GPUs in the $200 to $300 range. I see cards like the Radeon 6700 XT, Radeon 6800, the RTX 3070, RTX 2080 Ti pop up in this price range every so often. And all of these are faster than most of the GPUs that I've seen in any of the recent $500 budget build guides. This is the full pricing breakdown of the build. If we include the cost of what the SSD would have been, the total comes to just above $500. Without it, we're sitting at $478 for this. I keep bragging to friends and family about it that I know don't care about it, but I just keep coming back to what a score this build really is. I just wanted to address that if you were wanting to build something similar to this, there's a few areas to keep in mind that you can kind of adjust to fit your own needs. So one of them is that Ryzen 7 5700X 3D. If you're not caring too much about like getting as high of a frame rate as possible, it would be good to swap this out for a 5600. That'll free up about $50-$60 of the budget that you can then put that towards other things. In this example, I would probably say put towards the graphics card, finding a graphics card, or putting towards maybe a better power supply. $20 is a pretty low amount for a power supply currently. Another thing to keep in mind, if you don't care too much about the looks of your PC, you just want it to run fast and run good, going with the cheapest case you can find will save you $1 or $2. If you have any thrift stores nearby you, a lot of the time you can find an old PC case there, or on the used market. Things like Facebook Marketplace, people are often offloading a case from 10, 15 years ago that works fine, it just looks dated. And if you're okay with that, definitely use one of those and use the rest of your budget to put towards something else that's actually going to affect the performance of your computer. Now that we've gone over all the parts in the build, let's go ahead and get into testing this PC. How does it actually perform? Before getting into the benchmarks, I wanted to mention that there were a few comments about the temperatures being a little bit toasty when I tested the GPU in my last video. The benchmarks in this one are similar. Originally, I was a little bit concerned about the temperatures hitting the 80s, but after reading a few Reddit threads, it seems that this is pretty common with this specific graphics card, and this is in the safe operating temperatures for this card. Also, from what I can tell, the card's not thermal throttling at all. The GPU is still boosting above its rated boost clocks. In most games, it sat in about the 1800 to 1900 megahertz range. I think I saw it dip below that one time for a split second, so I'm pretty confident that it's running as expected, even if it is a little bit warm. That being said, you guys did pique my curiosity, and I did test undervolting the card, and I also reapplied thermal paste, so we'll get to that after the benchmarks. Let's roll those benchmarks. Like I said earlier, I wanted to test undervolting and repasting the card, so I didn't see a ton of difference after repasting the card, but there was some improvement with undervolting the card. Watching the card's frequency in most of the games during testing, I saw it sit around the 1800 to 1900 MHz range. So I started the undervolt off by setting the frequency to 1875 MHz at 900 millivolts. There was a slight difference in temperature, maybe 2.5 to 4 degrees, but it did seem to continue to creep towards 80 degrees consistently. I also tested lowering the voltage to 850 millivolts, and the temperature did seem to stay closer to 76 degrees when I was playing Call of Duty. So I'm definitely seeing a benefit from undervolting, but it's not as drastic as some other cards that I've tested. As I mentioned in my last video, the card did come with a water block, so testing this out makes me want to test water cooling this thing, but that'll be for another time. All in all, I'm still blown away by this build. This is close to the fastest PC that I've ever built, and it cost me $478 in 2024. This has got to be some sort of like price to performance record or something. Nah, I'm just kidding. I've got nothing on Tech Yes City, but I think this is one of the reasons that I love building PCs, and especially building PCs using used parts. It's always a bit of an adventure, but also the value is just through the roof. Anyways, that's all I got for you today, but I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.